Meet David Holt. David grew up in Florence, Alabama, and dreamed of becoming a musician, but after some time, he found his true passion in media. David went to school at MTSU for television and live sports. He then would go on to work at Fox 17 in Nashville before leaping into teaching in 2015. Since then, his students have earned 24 Mid-South Emmy nominations as well as other awards. Now at Page High, David is shaping the next generation of broadcasters and hopes to retire there. Because when you love what you do, why stop? And now, welcome to Convos with Aaron. I love your studio.
I am very proud of this. I mean, the district, Williamson County, has been very good to us. Dr. Qualls is the CT director for the county. But really, I think what helps us out a lot is we have a fantastic administration. You know, I think that sets the tone for everything else. Dr. Hill and the assistant principals, Randy Hatley, Ken Reed, Kelly Sailors, now we got Zach Kozwanski. I mean, whenever I need something or need help, I mean, they're quick. And so that makes it a lot easier on me. We don't have to deal with discipline issues. We don't have to deal with things, and they accommodate.
Well, oftentimes too, I know in the arts especially, there's a lot of friction between maybe asking for funding or wanting some sort of piece of equipment, but you have to go through all these steps. So it's great that you get a runway essentially to what you need, and because they see the importance, and that's incredible. That's great.
Yeah, runway is a good word for that. And I think because I've worked for administrations before that didn't have that creative mindset, they didn't get it. And so it was always difficult trying to explain what you're doing. And then you'd show them, you know, it's high school. They're going to have fun. The high school audience doesn't want to see boring, straight news. They want to be engaged, and they'll pay attention if they're engaged. Let's make it fun. But you got to have personality. And if you have admin that has no personality, they don't get it. Yeah. Our admin gets it and supports it, as long as it's not stupid. So we don't do stupid, but we do interesting. But there's a professionalism behind it. You know, there's the nuts and bolts, or the same nuts and bolts that go into if you were going into a national news network, or, you know, we just got back from WKRN yesterday. It's the same rundown, same process, the same lighting, the same production behind the scenes. It's just the content's made for a different demographic. Yeah. I think it just comes down to, you know, the admin here and the district, they give, I mean, the expectations are very high. And so, but there's a lot of support to reach those expectations. So when you feel like you have people helping you up, then you're able to reach higher and grow, which it's not about me, it's about the students. It's preparing the students for them to succeed. But all the awards, you know, people say, hey, congratulations on your awards. And they're not my awards. The students do the work. I just show them how to do it, and then I pay the entry fees. And I kind of give them a grade if they don't do it. So now there's a motivation because I can't pay them, you know. But if you can get them motivated and get them excited about it, they will never fail to surprise you and impress you. And I mean, right here, you always surprise me and impress me because I didn't necessarily have to motivate you. I would kind of give you some guidelines, or you'd ask me some advice. I kind of give you things, but it's really let you have your vision. How can I help you make your vision yours and stay out of your way? And sometimes I get it and sometimes I didn't, but it doesn't matter if I get it.
Well, I appreciate that, because that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you today about.
Cool.
I've never had a teacher quite like you. And this is not me saying
I'm
this
so
because,
sorry.
no, that sounds bad, doesn't it?
No,
but
it's good.
I'll say this. I'll say when it comes to your teaching style, I've never seen anything like it, which is fantastic because I think you are the only one who can do it. I think you have the perfect demeanor. Yeah. I think you have the perfect personality to be cool and calm and collected. I don't think I've ever seen you in a ruse per se, or in a like a manic episode. You've always been calm, even in moments like, for example, we filmed graduation in 2020. It was super chaotic. It was in a gym full of people, and you got through it. And that was a high pressure zone. I think that
I must have hit it very well if you didn't notice. It was frustrating. I think the main problem was we're trying to go live because, as you know, we couldn't allow that many people in. It was social distancing and all that, and there are a lot of people depending on the live stream. Well, we're depending on, the equipment wasn't the best, and the Wi-Fi network kept, dying. It wasn't able to handle the bandwidth. Numerous problems, but that's part of any industry. It's, you got to solve problems. You got to figure out how to make it work. And I think my experience working in live television, where you go, if you're scheduled to go on the air, football game starts or hockey game starts at 7:00. 7:00's happening whether you're ready or not. So you be ready, and they don't stop the game because, oh wait, we're having audio issues, we can't hear what. Tough.
You gotta go.
Yeah. You gotta go.
Yeah.
And if you panic, then you're not thinking logically. So emotion negates logic. So you have to find a way. It's okay to feel your emotion, but you have to find a way to compartmentalize it briefly. Deal with the problem. When you're done with it, then you go home and then you kind of unwind, because you don't want, it's not healthy to hold in emotion. Find like I'll vent to my wife or I'll vent to friends. Find a way to talk about it, express it, and get that frustration out in a healthy way, and then figure out, okay, how do I make it better?
That's perfect. So, I think a lot of teachers can learn from that too. A lot of teachers do that, but a lot of teachers can learn, because you're dealing with a bunch of students that are still growing and learning and figuring out what they want to do in life. And that could be a really stressful task for not only them as a student, but also the teachers. And so, like I said, for you to be able to do that and do it really well and consistently every time, like I said, it's something that has inspired me in my ways of how I work with people and how I talk to people. Mm-hmm. I try to always be, like you said, calm, cool, and collected. Mm-hmm. And then if there's something where it's a situation that just is horrible or nasty, or sometimes can even just be toxic, and you don't want to deal with that person,
right?
You still handle it in a pleasing and very just calm way, and then you deal with it later. And I want to tell you something too, because thank you for coming, by the way. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, when you sent me that invite, I was so honored, because I've been following you, and I saw that podcast, and I saw that, it was like, you've come a long way from Taco. Right?
yeah. Taco, my first podcast in high school, which I set up my mom's phone because it had the best recording, and I would talk, and we would talk and talk, and I loved it, but it had nothing to do with tacos. The branding was weird. So I decided for this one to have my name in it at least. Right. So it's consistent at each episode. Right. It has me. But going back to what I was saying, I graduated, the year I graduated, I went to MTSU, which is also your alma mater.
Absolutely.
And it's a fantastic school.
Good.
And all that to say, there's a thing there where they have several different programs about TV and everything. This happened 3 years ago, so it's not going to be difficult to tell this story. But off of the excitement I had from your class, I went in expecting the same level of guidance or necessarily openness to ideas. Like you talked about, you try to make it happen. And so for whatever reason, my freshman brain thought, I want that. I'm gonna expect that, because it's a bigger school. There's probably gonna be more creatives there. But in turn, I remember working with the TV station there, and I wanted to get this really cool show together where it was gonna be called Goodnight MTSU, and it was gonna be a late night show dealing with just MTSU students. It was just gonna take care of that. And I had ideas about doing it both online, so you release the episode after it airs on the TV station, and then playing it in things like the cafeteria there and TVs later at night in the library.
I love that.
Yeah, I was excited about it. We had a little team that we were pulling together, and we were so excited.
Yeah.
But there was a person who, I'm not gonna say any names because there's no point, but there was a person who was already trying to test it a little bit, and I was a freshman, he was a senior, so there's a little bit different of a dynamic there. When it got to shooting the first segment, we were testing it out. We were doing free jokes or free puns, and we were set a table out in the common area, and we were just inviting people to come on, and it was fantastic. I thought it went really good. I had a co-host on, Jackson, shout out Jackson Hubbard. He's fantastic too. And we were just playing off of each other. I was playing off of the camera, the people. I thought, all right, we got this in the bag. And then all of a sudden, that guy who set up the cameras and helped us, that senior, he came up to me and said, you know what, Aaron, you treated me like, I'm not gonna say the word, but you treated me like a bad genital. Right. And that hit me so weird, because I thought I was able to control the environment and make everybody feel good, because I always intentionally do that. But that wrecked the show. Just that one connection, because he ran most of the TV station, that wrecked it. And thinking back on it 3 years later, I've learned so many lessons from just that moment.
Exactly, yeah.
I've learned, even though I think I'm calm and collected, I still need to go that extra step to make sure everybody feels appreciated and welcome. And I never want to make anybody feel blindsided like that again. That's a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
And so building off of what you've taught us and what I've learned, just being able to say, and my mom says this, try to say the next best thing, the next best thing.
Right. I'm not perfect. And when I transitioned into teaching, so I'd worked in the broadcasting industry. It's, I think, like 18 and almost 19 years. I always round up to 20 because it sounds fancy. But almost 20 years. Without going into the whole long story, my daughters at the time was 2. I was driving from Murfreesboro to Nashville, so I mean, some days you're spending 2 hours on I-24. Also, when you're working for a giant corporation, it feels like, what's the point of what I'm doing? Okay, so ratings went up, 0.5%. Big deal. I don't feel anything. So transitioned into teaching. A job came open. It's like, hey, there's a teaching job. Do you want to teach broadcasting? And my wife said, when it snows, you don't have to go to work. Really? That's right. It's like, and you get summers off. You mean like 2 months? Oh, that's right. So I gave it a shot. Started in the middle of the year. And I had no idea what I was doing. But later I kind of started figuring it out, and it was a process, a lot of failures. But as you were talking earlier about how you made that student feel bad, you didn't mean to, but you saw his reaction and he confronted you, and now you learned from that. So I remember I was in a frustrating moment. I was trying to figure out a bunch of things, and I had a really good kid, but he didn't really problem solve. He didn't have the confidence to problem solve much. And he would ask me questions at the most stressful time, and it's not his fault. But he asked me a question, and I remember I responded, look, you need to figure out your own problems. And that is like, it took a second, but later it's like that came back, and I felt so awful. And sometimes in the moment you don't think about it, but when you look back at that moment, I remember seeing his reaction. I remember hearing other kids go, ooh, which makes it 10 times worse. So later, when he graduated, I remember, I think a few days later, I went and apologized. And was like, look, I'm not perfect. I'm learning here. I'm sorry. You're a great student. And when he graduated, I apologized again. I still feel bad for that. But, my granddad always told me, you have to fail before you succeed. And it's little failures, it's big failures, but it's not a true failure unless you stop. When you quit, that's when you have failed. And now it's a difference between realizing, futility. There's a difference between futility and failure. Now, when you're pursuing something that's just not going to happen, it's impossible. And you're actually spending more resources trying to get something futile to work. To stop, regroup, and try something different, that's not failure. But when things get hard or you screw up and you're like, I can't do it, you just keep doing it. Just try it. And you'll know it's different. It's not futile when you see that little success. And I think later, when that same student we're talking about, later he won the first ever award a student won in my career, a Rutherford County award. Super proud of him, and he got his picture made, and he's beaming, and I love that. And later, kids started getting nominated for Mid-South Emmy Student Awards, and It's a process
Yeah.
and little things like that. But I'll tell you, I almost quit. I called my old job at Fox 17. It's like, hey, I got to get out of here. This is terrible. And they'd already filled my position. And so the plan was I'm after Christmas break. So I started after fall break. So that's mid-October. Christmas break, I'm out. There, I hate this. One kid wrote me a note just before we left on Christmas break and said, I still have it, paraphrasing, Mr. Holt, you're doing a good job. We know it's tough. We hope you stay. It's like, oh.
Yeah. All
right, I'll stick to it through summer. We'll see.
How do you say no to that? How do you say, yeah.
You don't.
Yeah.
And I am very stubborn. And now it's like, I'm going to get through this year. If it kills me or something, I'm going to finish. And I did. And I'm glad I did. I'll be honest, I'm having fun in the second career. And, we went to the Preds last night and we toured, TV station. I do get nostalgic, wanting to. I would not trade it though. I wouldn't go back because I did that, but I'm happy now. Could I get paid more doing that? Well, sure. But if you have a choice between money and happy, you choose happy.
Yeah.
Money will take care of itself. You'll find a way to make money. You'll figure that out. But would you rather go to a job where you're miserable every day and have more money? Or would you rather go to a job where you have a house, you have what you need? You've been blessed with home and food and you have the essentials. But you're happy. You have fun going to work.
And what would your advice be to somebody who's thinking about transitioning into something like that?
Transitioning into teaching or changing their career?
Or just in general, I think changing into a career, the life lessons you've learned from that transition of maybe I should switch a career. Well, you're still teaching media and that's what you did, but it's still, like you said, it's a different context completely.
Completely.
So what would you say to somebody who's trying to move into a different direction in life?
That's a good question. So I would say, be prepared to feel like you have made the biggest mistake of your life, because it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. It is painful because everything that you are conditioned to, because humans are creatures of habit. We like routine. And then all of a sudden you've changed your job, your routine is now completely different. It hurts, it's hard, you'll feel anxiety, you're depressed. But the thing is, you take it day by day, find a small victory every day, find a small way you can improve every day. And as long as you're seeing these little victories, little things that are getting better and little growth, and students will tell you, they're honest. They're as big as you. Some of them, I've got students bigger than me, right? And I'm not a small guy, but they're still kids and up here, say their brains aren't done cooking yet, and they will tell you if you're doing something right or if you're doing something wrong.
Yep.
And when they give you these little nuggets, hey, you're doing this right, I like this, and you see them improving, as long as you see improvements in what you're doing, it's not futile. Stick with it, keep going. But also I'll say there's peace in contentment. Okay. So when you work in corporate industry, especially in TV, you're always trying to get that next rating. You're always trying to beat the competition. Sales, you're always trying to break your budget and go farther. There's always more, and there's always going to be somebody better than you, no matter how far you get. Everybody, there's somebody better. Find your peace and contentment, right? We've done really well here. Brentwood gets more awards than we do every year. And I'm super competitive, and part of me is like, oh, I want to get them. But then again, I'm very thankful that we have what we have, and there's a peace in that. So when you enjoy what you do and you find contentment, and you don't need to drive a Porsche, you can have one if you want, but I always wanted a Jeep. I may have told you this when you're a student, my goal is I'm going to get a Jeep one day.
I think you did tell me that. Yeah.
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 Out in the parking lot, I got a Jeep.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it comes there, but it's not a Bentley, it's not a Maserati. Yeah. I don't care. I'm content with my Jeep.
Yeah.
I
think also that going back to what you were saying about stress too, certain little bits like that, like when you're reminded of what you've accomplished and what you've seen, I'm sure it helps. It's helped for me in some incremental ways of seeing too. I remember the first episode come out. I was so tired this week, and when it came out, that feeling of just, oh, I have this. It's done, and it looks nice, and it's done, and that dream is something that I've accomplished, and I'm ready to go on to the next. But that's just a reminder of the hard work that I've done. Like you said, the Jeep is a hard reminder of the work that you've done, and to be content in that is a hard skill to master, but it's something that when you do master it, and I'm still learning this completely.
Me too.
It's refreshing and it keeps you humble. So
yes, that's a good way to put it. So, well, let me ask you a question. So when you finally got that podcast done, even though you were tired and all that, how did you physically feel? Did you feel that weight, that kind of relief?
Yeah.
You did?
There was a little bit there. Like I said, it felt good to have it out.
Right.
I will say, college, since I'm in my senior semester, it's stressful every week. There's always a big something that you have to do that it will make you go crazy if you do not pace yourself. And that is something that, although it did feel really great, I still had to edit the next episode, and I still had to finish my board for our scholars competition, and I still had, you could replace, I always have something to be stressful about.
Right.
But like you're saying, to just take it step by step, to breathe, and to not let that affect your mood when talking to other people. If I conveyed the stress that I probably feel right now deep down, this would be a horrible conversation. Because I would just be going and I would be drifting off. My mind would be going all over the place, and it already is. But that's just being a creative, I feel like. But
what were you saying?
Exactly.
No, I get that.
For real, yeah. And so it's something to put into perspective. But to answer your question, physically, it did feel pretty good.
That's perfect.
That being said, there's always stuff to do. So
it never ends.
It really doesn't. But that's also kind of the beauty of it. You're not really done ever.
Right.
Until you're in the ground.
But I think as you mentioned that, I think one's faith does help them get through that. When I was making the decision to go into teaching, so I'm at Fox 17. I had a job offer actually to work in corporate video. This place downtown, it was going to be a good job. And, they said, I'd be traveling to conferences. And they said, well, you travel about 25% of the year, which probably means about 45% of the year. And again, I have a 2-year-old, and she's our miracle baby. We only get one, and that's all we get. And I'm not going to be on the road and leave my wife alone at home and not be in my daughter's life and her not know me. I cannot mess this up. And so she and my wife, that is my primary investment. I prayed about it and essentially came to look, God, you just put me where you want me. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have that wisdom. This whole story. You're writing this story. And if I'm still above ground, then we're not at the end of the book yet. So
that's a good point.
Whatever, you just put me where you want me. And not long after that, a friend sent me a text, and she gave me a Bible verse, and I wish I could remember which one it was. But in that verse, it was talking about as a teacher. It said teacher like 2 or 3 times in that section. And I don't know. I think if sometimes you just kind of have this pull and draw to it. And I do believe we have a calling in life as to what we're supposed to do. And our experiences lead us towards that calling. And so I was supposed to be everywhere I was supposed to be. And that's part of my story. Good, bad, hard, nice, all my failures and everything, that's part of writing that story. And I believe what gets me through and what allows me to find ways to help the kids, and I'm still not perfect, but I think it's because I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm doing what I'm called to do. And by doing that, we've been provided with what we need with our home, with, provisions, and we're fine. Yeah. And there's that peace.
I think too, having faith as a creative and as, similar fields in video and everything, oftentimes if you don't know where your next job is going to be, having that faith that God will provide as long as you are active, as long as you are able to listen and see and pay attention when doors open.
Yes.
That's something that I've learned countless times, and I'm, like I said, I'm still learning. It's something that is a skill to have, because oftentimes too, that door can open and it's not what you thought. Like you were saying,
Exactly.
talking about teaching, that's not what you thought you were going to be doing at 20 years old, I can imagine.
Well, I can guarantee you I wasn't. It's my last class at MTSU, the day, like a couple days before I was graduating, last class ever. My teacher at the time, Mark Parrish, he's retired since I've seen him since I've told him the story. I said, all right, that's it. I'm done with school. I'm graduating. I will never step foot in a classroom ever again in my whole life. He said, you have just jinxed yourself. And now I do it every day.
Yeah.
You know,
God's irony, I could say.
You know, every time I say I'm not going to do this, I end up doing that. So I'm not going to have $1 million. I'm not going to. No, I don't care if I do or not. Yeah. But you know, if you're willing to serve where you're supposed to serve, and allow yourself to be put where you're supposed to be, and just do it with a joyful heart, even the hard days, you'll find a way to get through it. And you'll be okay. And you get to look back at the story, and it's like, it's an amazing story, but it's not just my story.
Yeah.
All of our stories are intertwined. Yeah. You know, and I think for you to be in my class is for me to be able to serve you. That was, I think, in all the students, not just you, but all of them. And so it was my job to equip you with what you need to be successful using your gifts and talents. So that way you can be successful and help someone else with theirs. And it's all a huge...
Creates a domino effect.
And that's my theory. I didn't go to divinity school. I might be wrong. There's probably, you know, but that's just what I think.
And I have to share something personally with you too, because going on off of that, I remember my senior year, the way it was designed and the way the structure was in terms of class load, it was 4 or 5 classes for the first semester, and then 4 completely classes in the other half of the semester.
It's called the AB block.
AB block, yes. And I had that, and I had all my fun classes with you and then several other teachers at the beginning portion of my senior year. Yeah. And this is still during COVID, so this is during the heavy, like, you don't know if you're going to go to school tonight because of how many people are sick.
Right.
And that was an interesting thing. There were some days where we didn't meet, and we just had to do our projects for your class, especially over like Zoom or over
Teams,
at
Microsoft
home.
Teams.
Yeah, with Microsoft Teams, exactly. That was such an interesting process, but even then, I still found a lot of enjoyment out of your class with that.
Cool, well, I appreciate
that. That being said, that second half of senior year was horrible for me. It was horrendous.
Why is that?
So talking about some more personal stuff.
Yeah.
My friend committed right at the start of the semester. So you deal with that in an interesting way. I'd already decided to do a full hybrid semester where for the first quarter I would stay at home.
Right.
And so that I made that decision. So you have that, you're in your room the whole day.
Right.
By yourself, and you're thinking horrible thoughts. Like I had some horrible mental health issues during that section. I decided to go back to school, and I decided to go see a therapist. Good. And also just really keep in touch with my faith, and that was able to, all those elements were able to get me through it. But that being said, I remember too, you invited me to help commentate a softball game, and it was towards the end of the season, I believe, and you guys were filming a softball game.
Yes.
Yeah. And I wasn't even in your class. And so for you to do that too, and that was right when I started coming back. Yeah. That was a weird, emotional, and I loved it though. I loved it. And that really helped me to get back into school, because I said, I have to go back to school. I'm in my room the whole time. I'm missing, even though I don't have great classes, I'm still missing the people I love to talk to.
Right.
And you doing that for me was I'm very appreciative of that. And I can only think of how many students to have thought the same feeling of, man, I'm so glad Mr. Holt offered me this opportunity. I can only imagine how it feels to Let me scratch that again. Sorry, I'm stopping so much. By the way,
Stop as much as you want.
I feel like I'm still learning how to do this podcast. It's such an interesting skill because when I did it in high school, it was only 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I'm doing it now, it's like an hour, and I want it to be an hour.
Right.
But there's a lot of times where I just hit a dead end and I just go boom, blank. So I'm learning how to navigate that.
Well, that's normal.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, having worked with you know, professional talent, you know, before, you know, people that have done this for years and years, and, you know, names that I know you've heard of, they do the same thing.
Yeah.
They would stutter,
Yeah.
they would stop, they'd screw up. We'd have to do take and take and take and take, and they'd get frustrated.
Yeah.
It's normal.
Well, I appreciate that, and there you go. There's your supportive teacher mode going on, and I love it. I think that's brilliant, and like I said, that's why I wanted to have you on. I wanted to let you speak about why you teach the way you teach, because I'm so intrigued by that, and I will always be intrigued by that in some way. And I would love to get into education towards the end of my career, Lord willing. That's something that I think is just giving back to the students, like you were talking about, is serving them.
Yeah.
Is something that I think a lot of professionals need to do more. I think being able to teach the next generation and the generation after that, that's such an important human emotion and human skill to pass down. Yeah. Because how else are we supposed to keep the spirit of creating alive?
Exactly.
Without telling the youth about it.
Exactly, and that's part of it. And I think that's something, you know, anytime I've reached out to some of my former coworkers or people I know in the industry just to be a guest speaker, they come and they talk to us. And, you know, I'll mention, you know, Nick Duggar, who's now, you know, he went to MTSU, he's a Blue Raider like us. But he's founded TNDV, and I remember going into his first truck. He brought it like my senior year. It's like, it was barren, totally empty, but he had this vision, an idea, and he made it happen. Well, now he's executive director for the Mid-South Emmys, and he has been helping students find ways to get connected and meet the professionals. And so he invited 2 of our students to come work CMA Fest last summer, which is a big deal. And so when I was coming up, you know, about your age and trying to get in the industry, a lot of the old timers didn't want to teach you anything because you're the competition, you know? So if you're freelance and I make X number of dollars per gig and you know the same thing, but you make Y number cheaper, they're going to hire you and I'm out of job. So I was seen not as the next generation to train and bring up, but as competition. So there was a wall. And I think that happened to a lot of people in my generation. So the goal is not to have that wall, to preserve the future of our industry. Not only that, because Nashville is growing so much and there's so much more demand, to grow that talent pool to where you don't have to hire from out of state to come do work here. You have a homegrown network that knows how to do things the Nashville way. But you have young people earning a living, earning an income, creating things right here. And so Nick has been great about incorporating students into that, but meeting professionals and networking with them and have the professionals show them, this is how you do it. This is how you wrap a cable. This is what this is called. And actually put their hands on the camera and give them a little room to fail. When you put a 17-year-old on a camera that costs more than $100K, and it's called IMAG, image magnification. So you got a concert. Now it's not big name concerts. They're just kind of the side acts. It's the same experience. You got a crowd watching what this 17-year-old is doing. You got to have grace for them to fail because that's how they learn, and to be able to have that patience. Nick has been great. Bob Cole with the Predators. To invite us over and let students in the broadcast truck during a live broadcast. Wow. That's amazing.
And they'll remember that forever. You know, they'll remember that forever, yeah.
They do. But that's the thing, and already had a student say, Mr. Holt, I think this is what I want to do, right? Which means 20 years from now, he may be helping some kid do the same thing. And when the Predators are going to the Stanley Cup, I hope, and they're playing the Stanley Cup, maybe is one of my former students directing it, you know? Who knows? But I think, like you mentioned, to give back it's somebody helped us out. You know, I could go through and name people who helped me out get started. We need to help them out. And like you said, that's how you get the next generation going on.
That's beautiful. And I'd say investing in the next generation only comes with benefits. I can't think, I mean, people will say, like you said, that they're taking your job or whatever, but no, there will always be a job for you, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to just give back feels so good for me in the little bit that I'm able to at my age.
Mm-hmm.
And I always try to look for ways to. I help and run the communications team at my church, and
There you go.
being able to teach, like you said, 15, 17-year-olds
Mm-hmm.
how to handle a camera that's pretty expensive, and some would say you probably shouldn't be doing that with them.
Yeah.
It's experience, and it's something that they'll learn.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they don't go with that for their career path, they'll still take that experience of, okay, I know how to handle certain things.
Exactly.
I know how to handle professional. And that's something that you've always, prioritized and mainstreamed,
Mm-hmm.
is trying to get us the best gear with what you can. Especially at my school, I remember we're a little bit out of the way of Nashville. And so my question would be, when it comes to teaching kids, or in general,
Mm-hmm.
being in a space where you want all these things, you want all these experience for these kids to have, but you're not physically there.
Mm-hmm.
How would you suggest how would you suggest implementing some ways to make that experience still feel real and still support them through that?
You got to improvise. You got to, put things together, spit and duct tape. I know you may not remember the show MacGyver, but
I do, yep.
there you go. So MacGyver, basically, you could, defuse a bomb with a paper clip. You make do with what you got, but it's not necessarily the equipment, it's the person running it. The camera, whether it's a $100,000 camera or it's a $100 camera, it's just a lens. It's just some lens and light passing through it and hitting a chip, and that's all it is. And so when you teach a kid, I'm trying not to rub on this.
No, you're good.
Right here. Okay, let me start up. When you teach a kid proper shot composition, and they know rule of thirds, they know the difference between a mid shot, wide shot, how to create an establishing shot, and they know, don't just hold it, chest level, go low angle, go high, Dutch. And, once they get on a regular camera or a more expensive camera, it's the same concepts. It's, when you and I learned to ride a bike, we weren't riding a Trek $1,000 bike. We're probably, it was probably $100 bike from Walmart, with Spider-Man on it, mine had a little BMX, it's the same principles. It's the same concept. But like you mentioned, let me ask you, when you have those people that are experienced and they're holding an expensive piece of gear, how do you feel in here?
Well, I always try to create, in the amount of times that I have done it, now it's been about a couple of years that they've had experience with equipment like this. So they're way more versatile than they were before.
Yeah.
But kind of naturally, I just have an eye out constantly of seeing, all right, are they handling it well? Is it going to go well? Are they making sure it's taken care of? We went to student camp one year, and I brought the church's DSLR, or no, it was a mirrorless camera.
Yeah.
And I was very hesitant on them using it all the time, because in camp mode, they're going all over the place. And so I wanted to be careful, but I have to tell myself to take a step back. I have to, because how are they going to learn if I'm constantly hawking over them?
Yes.
So, and I can imagine you could probably elaborate on that way better than I can, because you've had more experience with that. But that's something that you have to do, right? Like, that's just step back. And
that was one of the toughest things for me to learn. So the fact that you're learning it now at your age, when I first transitioned into teaching, that took me a while. And so I'll tell you, you were way ahead of me when I was your age. Because I mean, how old are you? 22?
I'm 22. Yeah.
22? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was not. Yeah, I flunked out of my first school.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I went to University in North Alabama. But at the time, I was playing music. So Muscle Shoals, Alabama is known for music, and I was playing guitar. I had friends to play music with, and That's what I wanted to do. Well, my parents wanted me to go to college so I could stay on the insurance. What do you want to major in? I don't really like any of that. Well, I kind of like radio. Maybe I'll major in communications. UNA's communications program was not the best at the time. Wasn't interested. Then, you know, you kind of have to show up to class to pass it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I flunked out. When I flunked out, meaning we had a meeting where they brought me in a room with people sitting around the table saying, your grade point is 1 point something. We don't want you to come back to our school.
You got hit with a committee. Oh, wow.
It was a committee, yeah. It's like you have to justify your reasoning for being there. It's like, why are you taking someone else's seat when you're not going to show up and fail, right? And so there's like, get out. And that was a low point. But from that, I had to go to work. Right. And so, fortunately, I had a friend, her name was Andrea. She was working as a receptionist at WVNA Radio in Tuscumbia. She put in a word for me. I put in an application just on a whim, and she found out, she saw it and put in a word for me to the program director, and he hired me. And I was just doing commercials during the Braves game on the AM side. And unless you're a super big baseball fan, baseball on AM radio in a little small room with a bunch of dusty records is not the most exciting thing. No. But on the other side, they had FM too. So those classic rock on the FM side. Worked my way up, but I enjoyed it. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I totally lost my train of thought.
That's the point. That's the point.
Yeah.
That's what I love about podcasting. Like I said in our first episode, is being able to just go on tangents. And I feel it because I said it, during this recording, I said it too. I said, man, I'm dead end. I'm just rambling, whatever.
Yeah.
But the beauty of podcasting, especially now, and we talked about this, as people get more accepting with being comfortable on camera and not having to have a nose voice and talk like this.
Yeah.
It makes the content feel more real, and honestly, people engage with it more, I feel like.
That's a good point. I think this is kind of where we have a difference in generations in technology. Yeah. Because, you know, when you are, you know, I think I'm the last generation that went to school without internet, you know, and I didn't get online until I was your age, right? So I didn't visit a website. I never used internet until 22, right? So TV was very rigid with time. Right. Well, now those time boundaries are gone. Yeah. So I'm still in the mindset of make everything concise, little small blocks, and you know. But like you said, your generation is changing everything, and so I think it's kind of cool that it's okay, go on a tangent, say what you want to say. You have that relaxed freedom. Because when I do start to get on tangents, somebody can just say, hey, let's just skip that part and just kind of move forward,
true,
right?
True. That's what chapters on YouTube are for now, to be able to skip to the...
See, I didn't really, didn't, they do have chapters. Yeah. See, I feel old.
Well, you have to, it's hard work to make them, so a lot of YouTubers don't have them. Yeah. But if it's a long conversation, a lot of times people in the comments will segment them, and then you can just copy that into the video, and it'll show up on like, this is where they talk about Cheez-Its, and this is where they talk about, you know, random stuff. So it's really cool to see that segmented. But I think, like I said, I think you have this in my generation and younger now, which I'm getting older, which is crazy. Yeah, I would say younger, which they're actively online and sharing. Is there's two different, I'd say, attention spans out there now. There's super short, 5 seconds, or you lose me. Less than that. Because of TikTok and Instagram and social media. Boom. If you're not grabbing me in and pulling me in, if it's not funny or engaging, I'm scrolling. There's that. And then I think there's people too, driving to work, listening. That's where you get the longer form. So there's the medium format, I feel like will probably go away pretty soon. Right. And so you just have just a super long form podcast where they can listen to work, they can do the dishes while listening to it, they can cook while listening to it. It's something, either background noise, it could either be a Netflix show that's not really great, but also just, you know, visually and audibly they have pretty good engaging audio. Right. You're talking about that. That's the two that I've realized. Now, obviously I could be completely wrong, and I probably am, but that's from what I've witnessed to of my generation, which you hear a lot about the short attention span side. You don't hear about, no, my generation is consuming large form content. It's just not how we would usually consider it long form.
It's just different.
It's different, yeah. I think a lot of people, how it used to be is you sit down in front of a TV and you watch like 2 or 3 episodes or an episode, and you're like, all right, that's good. Whereas they're not necessarily maybe engaging in the visual aspect sometimes, but they're more so engaged in the whole thing and listening in certain moments where they want to listen, and then they'll pull out, and they'll listen, and they'll pull out.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So that's why we can talk and go on tangents, because we can say that one little thing, that nugget that keeps them to keep listening, and that'll be great for them because they are working, they are doing their thing. So it's
kind of like the hop on, hop off bus. You kind of come in when you want, kind of leave when you want, and so it's because it's back before we had internet and you could pause live TV or you could pause anything. I mean, it's when it came on at 7, you had to be in front of the TV at 7, or you could set your VCR to record it, and that felt futuristic. It's like, oh, you mean you can fast forward through a show? You can skip commercials in a show? This is amazing. It's changing so fast. And I think your generation has completely flipped our industry into something different. And what I'm curious about is I want to see what y'all do with this. Like the whole concept of a podcast did not exist when I was your age. What is going to exist when you're my age? Decades and decades and decades from now. What's it going to look like? Because my daughter's 11. What's it going to look like when she's my age? Because it's going to be your industry that you shape for her to come into.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I wonder that daily almost of what, and to remind myself too, when I get to that point, and it's easier said now than it is then, to be adaptable and to be understanding. Maybe not to compromise my social views, but to be aware and adaptive to the changes and not shaking my fist at the TV and be like, oh, you kids are not. I want to try to be like that. I want to try to be the cool guy that's able to keep up with times in terms of technology, trends, because why would I stay in the past? What's the point of that? I think we're progressively getting better. I think like I said, we're progressively being more open and being more honest in a lot of ways. So why wouldn't I try to do that?
That's interesting. And I think what you're going to find though, the challenge as you get older. So one of the projects I did when I got my master's was, so I have the master's from Alabama in instructional technology. And one of the papers I wrote was on, it's called the technology learning curve, or the technology adoption curve. So the older you are, the less likely you are to adopt and understand newer technology. And it has nothing to do with intelligence or education level or ability. It's, as you mentioned, being adaptable. The older you get, the harder it is to be adaptable.
Dang.
And so like my dad's very smart, he was an accountant for his career, math guy, brilliant. He has a flip phone. And to him, that's pushing him as far as he can. He doesn't even like the flip phone, So, how often do you hear someone like your parents or your grandparents, oh, I don't understand that, I'm not sure, and you kind of have to help them use a computer or help them find what they want to watch on TV. It has nothing to do with their intelligence. It gets harder to be adaptable the older you get. And I think part of that is, it's part of the transition to the next generation. We're not supposed to be able to adapt to technology that's not for us.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
We're supposed to adapt and create the technology for our generation, for the next generation to build upon. So, because we're not in this world forever, right? Everything we own, everything we have is all going to be owned by somebody else someday. And so what we do is we make the best we can in the moment we have for the next generation to build on top of that. So, my daughter, if I gave her a rotary phone, like when I grew up, when I was a kid, on the wall, we had the ugly yellow rotary phone with a big curly cord that was stretched out because you trying to talk in the living room and it's in the kitchen, and you dial it doing this, You have no idea what I'm talking about, do you? Or maybe so.
No, I've seen it in movies.
See, you see it in movies.
Because everything has already gotten ripped off of the wall and thrown away.
Exactly. So my daughter she wouldn't know how to operate. You've only seen it in movies.
Yeah.
I grew up with it. Therefore, I can use that. But I'm still, even though I know how all this is set up, it still feels a little weird to me to be able to talk as much as I want. Her generation is going to be doing things that you are not going to get. And it's like, this is weird. I don't get this. I'm having trouble with it. And so, yes, to your point of being adaptable, that is key. Always be adaptable. Always always be a student. Always learn new things and try. But be willing to accept it's going to be harder.
Interesting.
It's not for you. And always be humble enough to say, hey, can you do it for me? Can you help me? Because you have taught me stuff about the industry. You're teaching me stuff now. I mean, the cameras, I think I mentioned earlier, when I was shooting, is a big 30-pound camera on my shoulder. And now you've got, I mean, how much do these weigh? Maybe 2 pounds?
A little bit more because they're metal, but they are so much lighter than an over shoulder cam, I can imagine.
Yeah. So, I've had 2 lower back surgeries. Hopefully you don't have to do that. Now, what kind of camera is my daughter going to have? What kind of camera is, if I'm blessed with grandkids, what kind of technology are they going to use?
That is interesting too. And my question for that would be, how do you keep up with that? Do you just have to try a little bit harder as time goes on?
So I'm still learning, but what I'm still kind of getting used to this, but it's something we kind of talked about earlier about being hands off and learning you don't have to control everything and do everything. And allow the students to do it. And so what I'm learning is do what I can, but learn from the students and allow them to show you what is needed. Where's technology going? Where are things going? It's not this is how I've always done it, so that's how we're doing it. We can't do that in our industry. How is it going to be done now, and what's the trend for it tomorrow? You're ahead of it. So I'm going to trust you to take care of this and do the camera and all that. If you tell me, hey, Mr. Holt, you need this camera, okay? I'm not going to question it. I'm going to look how much it is, obviously, because money's technology doesn't quite change.
True.
But I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to get what you recommend, and then I'm going to have my students learn. So I'll give you a little inside teacher thing. Problem solving it's a skill. We do teach that, okay? And I tell my students, hey, figure it out on your own. That's not for me being lazy or trying to be a jerk, because Mr. Holt's not always going to be there, right? Sometimes you're by yourself. Right now, you're by yourself setting up gear. I can help you a little bit, but I can't solve all the problems. You are a problem solver.
You talk about dealing with different generations too. I imagine that evolves. I imagine you have to think of new ways constantly of how to engage people, especially students who are still growing. And like we talked about, have a short attention span oftentimes, especially for things that they don't want to hear, that they're tired of hearing.
Right.
I think there's a mixture of having to be adaptable and teachers needing to be more adaptable nowadays, and also questioning what's the reason why we're actually learning this?
Yes.
I think there's some things that we do, especially in America, because that's the only place, specifically Tennessee, that's the only place that I can talk on because I've experienced it. Is this information that is even helpful for us to teach our kids? Is it information that's helpful for our teachers to continue teaching this? Or is there a better way? And that's gonna be the age-old question of education, I can imagine.
Yeah.
What's the best way to teach kids what they need to know?
Right.
And I think the question that we're asking right now too is, what do they need to know?
That's a really good question. You brought up a good point. So what do you think? What do you think? What do I think?
Yeah. I think that you see enjoyment, like you said, in your class, because oftentimes they want to be here. What's the problem with tying in some of those lessons that they just need to know in life into classes like this? What does that look like? That's a difficult thing, I understand. How do you attach algebra to a stage? I'm sure there's ways you can do it. I'm sure you can build a set. I'm sure you can deal with lighting and how that reflects. But already that's so much more interesting than seeing what how much a shadow is on a picture.
Right.
That's, and no disrespect to the people who have came up with that. But I just think we're seeing more and more now questioning, why are students learning this? And why are they learning it in a way that's so alienating and so demanding that you need to learn it this way or else you are left behind?
Right.
Yeah, what would you say to that?
Well, it comes down to adaptability. And I think as humans continue to learn and as generations continue to change, every generation of teachers come in and change, we're figuring out what do we need to know and what we don't need to know. And so especially as technology has changed, what we need to know 100 years ago isn't necessarily what we need to know now. And but I think when you're talking about, if you're doing calculus, what's the point of doing calculus? Okay, I solved an equation on a piece of paper. What's the point? How is it relevant to anything in reality? Well, I'll give you an example when I first started teaching here a couple of years ago. So it's a senior prank, right? Every school has it. We're very strict and guided with the senior prank, and I think it's sort of like, I don't know if it's the best analogy. I would say it's kind of like a fight in hockey. It's not good.
Yeah,
right.
But it's going to happen.
But
yeah.
If you do it in a contained, structured way, like the refs will like, okay, you can do it here and do this, and these are your parameters. Get it out of your system, do what you need to do so you're not hurting anybody and wrecking everything. Okay, you're done, stop, right? That's kind of how they do the senior pranks. Like, okay, here are your rules, here are your parameters, here's what you can do. If you vary away from that, that's bad, right? Well, when I got here, the senior prank was the students they came in overnight, blew up thousands of balloons, literally thousands. They used calculus to figure out the volume of the stairwell and how many balloons. We have three levels. And they took like saran wrap on the bottom floor and created, the barrier. And then they knew exactly the calculations. They filled 3 levels of the stairwell with thousands and thousands of balloons, right?
Wow.
So they're using calculus. They're using things they've learned and they've applied it in a real way, not for a senior prank, but when they go into an industry or go into somewhere else, now they can use it in a productive way. Yeah. But you know what? Afterwards, all those balloons were everywhere. I mean, you're in a sea of balloons. Dr. Hill and our administration was like, you were picking up every single one, and they did.
Wow.
And I think in about 30 minutes, every balloon was gone. So again, you teach the calculus, you teach the real world part, but then you have the soft skills of the responsibility. You did this, you had fun, that's great, but you need to be proud of your school. This is not just for you, it's for everyone. You're out, it's got out of your system. Now you pick up every single piece. Just like the hockey fight. Okay, you got in your fight, you got out of your system. Now you sit in the penalty box and you accept the consequence for making that choice, right? So it's sort of like a structured rebellion, I guess. If you allow students to kind of have that structured rebellion, like sometimes, I give a little grace to kids who get a little hyper at the end of the day, or they've had tests and ACT and they're tired. You give them a little grace. I guess, does that make sense? That's sort of a long answer.
Yeah, well, no, I think it's thorough and great. I think the tragedy and the travesty of that is a lot of students, but more so a lot of teachers, may not be able to do that.
You're right. And that's a good point.
And so having to figure out a system where that's built in more so than just the teachers relying on doing that would probably be more substantial and more supportive, I can imagine.
I would agree with that completely. Like when you produce things, creativity, it looked great, looked professional. It's like, this is fantastic, right? And you did the best you can, but that's the tools that you've been equipped with. Now, I've had other students, they put in the same amount of effort. They try, they do everything they can. They don't have the creative tools. They don't have the ability. So do I hold the same comparison to someone who's at the professional level here and hold them to that same level? It's not the same metric.
Yeah.
They don't have the same ability, yesterday at the Predators, they had the Marines doing the pull-ups, and my students like, hey, I want to do pull-ups. And they're doing it, right? They're 16, 17, 18. Mr. Holt, you do one. I've had 2 lower back surgeries and I'm old and fat,
What now?
I'm bigger than I've ever been, right? So I knew I couldn't do it, right? So, but it's not the same. So you can't hold everybody to the same metric. I think the fact that I could get up there and even like jump and hold on to the bars, and be willing to try was good. So you but when you see that kid that put their heart into it and they tried, and out of that moment, they did walk away with more knowledge than they started with when they started the project, then you give them their own metric. I like that you did this. I see that you did this. This is good. Here's what we can do better. Instead of putting this, do this. So it's called glow and grow. So you always start off with the glow, right? Your positive reinforcement. And then you go in the grow. What can you improve on? Okay. But you always come at it as not the negative, but you use more like the collaborative, like now what we can do next time, right? Now they feel supported. Now they're hearing it. And now it's like, oh, okay, I get it. But you always go back to the glow. But overall, I think you've improved here. I really like this. The last thing you want them to hear is something positive, because now they have that good feeling, and that good feeling is what kind of makes it addictive where you want to do it again. When you critique, like, you should have done that, you should have been better, now you have a negative feeling, and now you go, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Well, now it becomes futile. That we were talking about earlier, and now that becomes failure.
And see, that's what I'm talking about. Like, you know it, you know how to do it because you understand and you adapt, like you were saying.
Yeah. So you mentioned, like, before this podcast goes out, that I get to see it and I get to, like, I guess approve it. On a journalism side, you don't do that. The story is what it is. You don't give your interview editorial rights. Because they can say, well, I don't like that I said that, but that was the story. So it's when you interview somebody, that's it, right? But, you told me that I get to watch it and like approve it.
Yeah.
That's totally different. So explain to me again different. Why.
So essentially, you're talking about journalism, and there's journalism podcasts, but
right.
Journalism as a whole is about trying to find something out, trying to get a story. The only story that I'm trying to get is yours. And that means you telling me.
Yeah.
And so if you want certain stuff cut out or anything like that, I've told every guest that I have on here.
Yeah.
That's important to me because I'm telling your story. I want people to know your story. I'm not telling the story of which you feel is truest to you if I'm not letting you have some of the reign. Like we talked about earlier of giving some leeway away to students. Mm-hmm. I feel it's the same way to guests, not in a educational sense, but more so in a comfortability sense. I'm not here to antagonize you, and that's what a lot of journalism is. Sadly,
shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be, but I think, and I'm taking a political campaign management class. Mm-hmm. That's what their job is. Their job is to find things out so they can get a headline, so they can get a story.
Right.
Like I said, the only story I'm trying to get is you, and so that being said. I want everybody who comes on here to feel comfortable. That's something I don't play around with because the guest is important.
Yeah.
And I'm very calculated in how I put things out. I try to be as much as possible. Yeah. That's why it's taken me so long to come out with a show like this. It's because I'm very detail oriented,
right?
And I want it to look good, and I want it to most importantly feel good. Sorry, that was long.
No, that's perfect. So again, you're teaching me, right? But that has to do with the ethics of the business. It was one thing to, because I was surprised when you told me I get to review this, because I was fully expecting what I say is up to you to cut, and I just hope that, everything's okay. And I mean, honestly, I don't necessarily think my story is that interesting, and I don't want credit for things like, when people say, hey, congratulations on the awards, and no, that's the kids got it, and like we do something called WCS Game Day, and it's, they do kind of like ESPN Game Day, and well, they always credit, the kids and all. They always put my name in the, and thanks to, Mr. Holt for doing that. I don't want my name mentioned. I'm behind the scenes, because if I'm not mentioned, then the kids get all the spotlight. I don't want spotlight. My name is not on any single award up there, and I don't want it to be. It's not mine. I don't own it, So it's kind of weird. It's like, hey, I want to hear your story. It's like, it's not really that great, but I think, seeing it from someone else's perspective, when we only see things from our view, it's sort of like when you hear your own voice through a microphone. You're not hearing what everybody else hears, So when you hear it played back, it feels weird. So for me to talk about myself feels weird. I don't want to talk about myself. I want to learn about other people. So I'm not used to talking about myself this much. But what I will say is I was a little nervous starting out. I don't know if you could tell, but I was a little nervous because, I don't like to be the focus. You have made things very comfortable, and I've completely, something I've learned and something I tell is like, when you have a good interview and you're conducting a good interview, your guest will forget all about the lights and the camera, and they're just having a conversation. Most of this, what we just did, I completely forgot. Everything on this side, and I'm covering my face, which is a big no-no right now, but everything on this side just kind of disappeared. I'm just talking to my buddy Aaron, who I used to teach.
That's the point of it, I feel like, which
Yeah.
is beautiful. I think if I want to do this professionally, I have to act like I'm doing this professionally, and I have to strive to do that professionally.
Yeah.
And I want to create an environment where if I have a guest on, I'm making the right eye contact, I'm saying the right things, I'm acknowledging what they're saying. That's what I've been taught, and that's what I've tried to learn is to be able to have a good atmosphere for the guests so they can disappear. Because that's the magic when podcasts get going, and when you can kind of see the momentum and hear the momentum going, it's fantastic, because that means that they're in it. Both of them are in it. And that's one of the reasons why too, like I said, it's taken so long, is because I wanted to have the appropriate amount of exposure to I've listened to so many podcasts before this because of this. I wanted to do this. In your class, I remember, I was really influenced by talk shows. That's all I would watch is SNL and talk shows. And I learned a lot from that. And piggyback of what I was saying, it's like building. It's like building blocks that add to something. And I feel like at this point in my life, I'm at the point where I can do this and I'm able to. I will still give myself, and I'm asking you guys to give myself some growing room, but I feel like I'm in a great part in my life where I can do this.
Yeah.
And so that's very assuring for me, and I appreciate that. And Darren, our blacksmith that came on last week, he said the same thing, which was such a blessing. And that's reassuring me that I should keep doing this, even though it is a school project. It's something I want to build and grow off of.
Yeah.
And and this is me being ambitious, but I see this as a PBS show for the modern crowd, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. I think that is really interesting. I like that.
That's what I want it to be. I want it to be a conversation with people that are different than normally, like you said, like yourself. You don't feel like you need the attention on you, but that's the whole reason why I'm doing this.
Right.
Is because people like you need to be celebrated and deserved.
I don't know about that.
They do, because at that point, they do feel heard. And you have a piece of content that you can show your family that, hey, look at this interview that I did, where it's telling essentially my story and some tips and tricks that I've learned. That will last beyond you and then some.
Wow. Yeah.
So that is something that drives me. That's why I haul gear out, is because I want to capture the person in their environment.
Yeah.
How they work, what they work, how they work with other people.
Right.
And to get that magic of all they're doing is talking to me and not realizing there's a camera.
It makes perfect sense. Absolutely. And I think just kind of in closing, it's this moment right here, I think, is a reward, and kind of, I am so incredibly proud of you, and I feel privileged and honored to be able to have had you as a student, even that brief moment. And even if I just gave you like one little nugget that you may remember or help you out that might make things easier for you, then, I think I did what I was supposed to do. And seeing the next generation being equipped and passionate and doing really cool things that I had never thought of and teaching me, that to me is more rewarding than anything you can get earthly. Anything, paychecks or ratings or awards or accolades or anything like that, that does not really fulfill. It's seeing that maybe I've done a little something to help you in life, which that to me, I'm incredibly proud of you. And this is, I love this. So you have one last assignment.
What's my last assignment?
Your last assignment is you need to pay it forward, and you need to help some young kid. You're going to run into them. You're probably already doing it. You say you work with a youth camp, but you'll start seeing it. Some young kid is going to be passionate, and they're going to ask you a bunch of questions, and they're probably going to get on your nerves. You never got on my nerves.
Well, okay, I feel like I did sometimes, but okay, that's good.
You never got on my nerves. But I do have students, past and present. I mean, they're kids, and teaching is taxing, it's fatiguing. It takes a lot out of you. But you're going to find those kids, you need to invest in them the way others have invested in you, and make sure they're equipped to be able to invest in the generation coming after them.
I appreciate that.
So that's your assignment. So hopefully I gave you one little thing that you can pass on or help you out. But yeah, Aaron, I'm the one who's been blessed and very privileged to be able to sit in here and chat with you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Me too, and I appreciate your willingness to be open and honest without compromising anything. And that's a skill that you have, and I appreciate that. And that's why I asked you, because I knew you had it, and I knew you're one of my favorite teachers. So of course I was going to ask you, because it also relates to what we're talking about. It relates to creatives and dealing with. And I know that sounds bad, dealing, but that's the truth. Is having conversation and talking with younger people. That's something that people need to listen to, is because a lot of times they're not equipped to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They're just dropped in a situation like you were talking about. Mm-hmm. So that being said, we can wrap it up.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate Page High School for being willing to accept this interview. And I am just thrilled with our conversation. I can't wait to get it out. And so if you'd like to, and we would love you to, you can subscribe, and you can also like, and you can also share. I'm not saying you have to do any of that stuff, but if you could, that'd be amazing. We can continue our growth, and we're shooting this right when the first episode came out a couple days ago. Seeing the support that I've gotten already, it's been incredible. And I will always be appreciative of that and show as much as I possibly can. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
And your assignment is to click the subscribe button.
Oh, that's good.
Right underneath there, or you're going to fail the class. So your homework, click the assignment button. Also, share some of these podcasts, not necessarily this one, definitely the blacksmith. That's a cool one. Share that, send it out to your friends, but you might, who knows? You want more content like this, you need to share it, you need to subscribe it, turn on the notifications, and support young media talent like Aaron.
Beautiful, thank you. That's it. All right. Well, like I said, lastly, if you have a guest recommendation that you would love, or if you want to be a guest yourself, you're creative, you feel like you have a skill that you want to share, you can contact us at convoswithaaron@gmail.com. We would love to have you on. You just have to shoot us an email, and we'll discuss it and talk it through, and I'll come to you. So thank you, and goodbye. All right.